We're living in a world of just information overload. Um, I think everybody probably agrees. There's too much.
Irrespective of whether you're self-employed, you work for a small company or even a large organization, we're all thinking now, is this going to replace me? What's the one thing everybody here should take away from this session?
That your second brain isn't a filing system. It's a thinking infrastructure. The goal isn't to store more, it's to think better. Everything else follows from that.
What if the AI leaked itself because it's so powerful in order to replicate itself and make sure that it survives in the wild? So just like an interesting...
Yeah.
I was going to go get my tinfoil hat. Hold on.
Yeah.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is a fun one. We've got Des and Daniel. Daniel and Des. Just stuck,
The
stuck
dynamic
in the
duo.
middle. It's like an Oreo cookie.
Wait, then we have to...
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, my name is Lior from Exploring ChatGPT on Substack. And Daniel, Des, if you'd like to introduce yourself in any order.
Yeah, I'm Daniel. I write Try AI and usually join Lior for these sessions on Wednesdays.
Hi, I'm Des Kennedy, and I write over at Applied Creativity. So that's deskennedy.substack.com. And I write about creative leadership and creative thinking.
Cool. Yeah, so basically, if you guys saw the title of the live stream, it is titled Second Brain. We've discussed, me and Daniel and I, whatever grammar you want to use, we've explored this topic before. And Des was actually watching that live stream, and he's been actually on a lot of live streams. So we finally were able to bring him on. So thanks for joining us, Des. And just to give like a quick background before we jump in, and Des has a really cool demo, and Daniel and I both have some questions for him as well. Just to give a quick background here, we're living in a world of just information overload. I think everybody probably agrees. There's too much. And our little human brain, not to minimize it, still powerful, still special, can only handle so much. And especially in this world of AI, how do we actually organize those thoughts? You might have something a week ago and then you forget about it and, oh, what was that idea that I had? So let's jump into it. Second brain, we're going to I believe it's called Obsidian, which Daniel spoke to me about in one of our previous streams, and Des is using it as well. So yeah, let's get into it.
Okay. I think the term second brain is something that is quite ubiquitous now, but I first came across it probably 2022 when I read a book by a guy called Thiago Forte called How to Build a Second Brain. And that was fundamentally what that was about, was organizing information. So if you use something like Notion or Evernote, which I'm a user of, you could collect and curate pieces of snippets of information that were of interest to you, and then you could tag them and join them together, and they would become useful. Because what most people do, I think, and certainly I did, I don't know if you look at my Evernote account, I never use any of the features of Evernote. I just grab everything and chuck it all in. And it's akin to a kind of those really cool junk shops that you go to, and there's loads of great stuff, and a stuffed bear and a kind of a suit of armor and a kind of bag of ball bearings or whatever, and it's all over the place. That's what my information was like. And I think
Knowledge hoarding.
yeah, absolutely. You just need all of this stuff. And I was like, that'll come in useful.
Save for everything, organize nothing. Just...
Yeah, absolutely. And then when you revisit it, you go, God, that is cool. But where does it fit? Why did I pick that up? And what is it doing? Like, I mean, I've changed jobs, or what is, so being able to kind of sort that out, I think is really appealing. So my kind of background, I started an agency. I've worked in design, I've worked in heritage and with heritage and museums for a lot of years. And when you think about a museum, what they do is they have collections. So they'll have, I don't know, Japanese pottery or Victorian paintings, and they're all sorted out. They're all put into categories. They're all given dates. There's information that comes along with them, so that when curators say, I want to do an exhibition, they can say, we'll put a Japanese sculpture in, and we'll put it, because the exhibition might be about, I don't know, celebrating nature or something. So we'll put a Victorian painting. So they can pull things from the archive and tie them together with themes. And it's then that those stories become valuable and then people can experience them. And that's really what this is all about. I think this is about being able to grab all of the best information from the business books you've wrote, the most inspirational quotes, the best that you've shared in meetings, the transcripts from meetings, the phone calls that you've had, the Substack lives that you're doing. Anything is really a data point now. But how do you get all of that information and put it into a kind of personal knowledge base so that you can call on it and use it whenever you want?
Yeah. Daniel,
So,
anything to add before Des does his
Yeah,
demo?
no, yeah, I'm 100% aligned with this on this because in my experience, you end up at two extreme. At least me, when attempting to manage knowledge, I either end up with just a dump where I just save everything and do nothing, or I sit down and attempt to over engineer it. And I go to a trailer, I build boards and make tags and try to maintain it. And then it becomes so overwhelming to try and actually continue that maintenance that in the end I just give up. I'm like, yes, I know it would be better to organize and tag everything, but I don't have the patience and the time to an effort to dedicate to it. And things like Claude Code in combination with Obsidian, and that's what Des is going to showcase, gives you that middle ground where you can capture a lot of knowledge, but have somebody else organize it for you according to your requirements without you doing the grunt work of doing it, which I think where the power of all of this second brain with AI lies to me.
Yeah, that's a great point. I will just add before Des pulls up his demo. I think this is really special. First of all, nobody's really talking about this. I'm all over the place in terms of seeing what's going on. Recent AI news. I talked to a cybersecurity expert. I talked to a professor, and then me and Daniel just nerd out. And it's like I will say I haven't experimented with this yet, but I think there's something really special about just that idea of being able to keep what you learn and then reuse it and organize it in a way where you say, "This is what's important to me, and I don't wanna lose this." Yeah, basically, that's all I really had to add, if you wanna get into it, Des.
yeah, I think that's really important. Before I start the demo, I think that the key thing is now that, especially with AI, and if you look at what you guys are doing, and I think you've touched on that point perfectly, you're trying to keep up with all of the developments, all of the tools, the latest thing, how that connects to that one MCP is, and it just becomes this sort of wow, how am I going to use this? And I've always been self-employed, I've always run my own businesses, but irrespective of whether you're self-employed, you work for a small company or even a large organization, we're all thinking now, is this going to replace me? Where do I add value? Which direction should I go in? And how do I make sure that I'm resilient in the face of all this change? And I honestly believe that this is the way to do it because of three things. We are all individuals in the sense that I'm 61 now and I've lived a life. I've had children, they've grown up, et cetera, et cetera. You guys are at different parts of your lives and journeys, but we all bring something. We all bring that kind of up ourselves to work, as it were. But then we also know now that the skills and knowledge that we had aren't going to see us through. Certainly for you guys or people younger than you, you're going to have to keep learning because there's so much now to learn. So it's you as a person. So this is context. You as a person, your attitude to learning, but also your mindset. So have you got a growth mindset? What's your attitude and aptitude? What are your knowledge and skills? And how agile and resilient are you? Change is always going to happen. So, irrespective of the tools, irrespective of Claude or Anthropic or
Right.
OpenAI or goodness knows who else, this is a way that you can actually begin to say, let's start. Now, what I want to say is that I'm not an expert in this. I've only been doing this for about 8 weeks, and it was Daniel's and the other got me onto doing it, and I've just been going at it, really digging deep with it. And what I've found now is that it is now central to everything I do, and it's so central to
Exactly.
everything I do that I now offer it to clients. So what that means is I'm not offering it to everybody. Listen, give me some money and I'll show you how to do it. What I say now with the client is, listen, yes, we're going to help you solve this problem, but equally, as a parallel deliverable, we're going to help you build your second brain.
Right.
So, what that is a series of files. So, I'll share my screen with you. So there are three things think of this as a well, yeah. Think of this as a oh yeah, yeah. Ooh, looks boring, but this is a thing called Obsidian. So basically what this is, and you might know, you might be familiar with this. If you're not, if you are, forgive me, I'll pretend that everybody knows nothing. So what you're looking at here is ostensibly a view of a series of folders and files that are sitting on my desk. They are, um, each one sits in a structure, and each one has a particular purpose and a particular link. Now, unlike something like ChatGPT, where you're prompting, what I started with was I started playing around with Claude Code in the app and started saying, well, okay, how do we do this? How do I need to tell Claude Code who I am and what I do. And you do that in projects and all of that stuff and with co-work and all of that. So I started playing around with that. And then I started thinking, okay, how do I make this really personal to me? So I started asking Claude Code, the app, how I use Claude Code in Terminal, which is basically the black screen that you see on all those terrifying hacker videos where people are putting words and you think, oh my God, if I
You've
do
got the
anything
matrix code falling down.
yeah, I'm gonna blow up the world or empty my bank account or be hacked by somebody. I don't know what I'm doing. It's a bit like that. But once you get it up and running and Claude Code, the app will show you how to do that, you realize that actually you freed up your machine and the computing power of your machine. So you're installing Claude on your machine and you're exposing it to a series of files and folders. So what I started doing then was I started saying, okay, so some of the files were projects, some of them were books I'd read, PDFs of papers academic papers I found interesting, maybe articles from the web, whatever. And then I started saying to Claude, okay, this is what I'm doing. So I've been writing, I think from May last year on Substack, and I brought all of my Substack articles down. I put them in a folder and I said, find the themes. And it began building this sort of connection. And it made a suggestion to me that what I should do is add a thematic index to every folder. So for want of a better phrase, it's like a library card. It's got what's in the folder, what it's about, and why it would be important to me professionally. So I started building that. And then I'd say about 6 weeks ago, I watched Leo and Daniel on one of their sessions, and they were talking about Obsidian. And I'd looked at Obsidian and thought, I think it's just the same thing that I've got. And then Daniel said, no, it's like a navigation layer. It's much more sophisticated than that. Anyway, off I went. I got Obsidian. It's completely free, and you just install it on your Mac or your PC, and then you expose it to the same main folder, and then it's looking at everything that Claude's looking at. Now, the clever thing is that with just a few free plugins, Obsidian then becomes smart. So what you're looking at here is an MD file, which is, for want of a better phrase, is a document that a computer or a real person can easily read. And this particular one is about Notebook LM integration on my system. So on the right-hand side of this, with a simple plugin called Smart Connections, it gives you a semantic layer. So it's not keywords, it's a semantic layer. So what it's suggesting by reading this, it's suggesting that, and this is that thing I was talking about for you, Daniel, this is suggesting that actually these are the things that this links into. And so
Right. This node is semantically related to these ones that
semantically
you already
related to
have.
these. And so it's suggesting that it has linked. They're like links, synapses in a brain, if you like. It makes that link. Now, if I go, okay, this prompt, and the one that says to use, is the notebook, is a particular ingestion prompt I use. I'm not going into that yet. If I drag that down and drop that into there, um, and what that's done is created what's called a wiki, which is how Wikipedia works, which is a solidifying of the link. The link still exists, but I've solidified that link. What that means is that every time I go through, this is now looking at every link that particular link I've dropped in here is linked to, and it's building out a kind of neural network. And if you want to know how that looks visually,
Mm.
Here are, I don't know if you can see this, but here are all of the
Oh,
things, or every node in this network is something that's in my system, in my co-create system, I call it. So in my knowledge base. And the things in the center are the ones with the most connections. Now, the reason they have the most connections is because I use them the most. And as I go into them, they're building up connections within themselves. Now, these connections, importantly, are based around what am interested in. So I'm going to assume that everybody knows who Richard Feynman is. If you don't, please look him up and look up his YouTube videos, how he explains science and physics. He was probably, I don't know, if people name one of the 10 cleverest people ever live, or smartest people ever live, he's probably in there. He Feynman was always amazed when people said he was one of the smartest people they'd ever met. And he said, no, it's an easy way of doing it. And he called it his 12 questions. So he had 12 questions always going on in his head. These 12 questions were the core of what he was interested in and what he understood and what he was trying to solve. And every time he heard something of interest, he said, that aligns to this question. So I've done something similar, I know nowhere near as smart, and I've called them pillars. So what I did was I went through everything that I've ever written. And written a lot over my career, and I've said, let's just tease out some pillars. What are the things the main themes that I write about? So things like navigating uncertainty, creative leadership, experimentation theater. Yeah. There's 6 of them. Capability versus dependency, the knowing and doing gap. These are all main themes that kind of link other things together. So once I've got them, they become the kind of core of my brain, and then everything else kind of comes off that. To give you an example, this morning I knew I was doing this, obviously. So I thought, well, I'll tell you what, I'll find out. I've got a Within Claude skills, I've got a skill called research profile. So I'll ask Claude to find me to research Daniel and to research Leo, and off it goes. It searches the web, finds out about these guys, comes back, gives me a profile in a template that is directly connected to what I'm interested in. So
mm.
it would make suggestions. So, for example, yeah, we did Leo earlier, so we'll do Daniel now. So here's yours,
Yay.
Daniel. So I haven't touched this. So this is the structure. So what we have is tags, the
It
thing.
doesn't have my search history, does it?
I don't know, actually. I haven't looked at it too closely. So, but what it does is it gives you an overview of what he's been up to, where he lives, everything that's publicly available on the web. So it'll look at Substack. He's obviously very active there, and it'll bring this down. But what it'll also do is it'll suggest possible connections to my
Mm.
work.
Mm.
So it'll say Daniel's audience are people who want to use AI, but aren't sure where to start. Natural fit for your second brain offer as the infrastructure layer. So that's what we're talking about today. So it automatically gives you context. And
Mm.
that's really what this is all about. This idea that you can create something that gives you context that becomes really powerful. Shall I keep going?
Sure.
Yeah, if you have something
Okay.
else you want to show.
So let me share my screen. So this is when this gets clever. So what you're looking at there is pretty much what Tiago Forte is talking about. But it gets clever when you introduce the thinking layer. So that's the navigation layer, the files and the folders, any type of files, sound files, video files, text files, HTML files, images, any type of file at all, audio files, anything can sit in there and becomes a data point. And then you introduce code. Now, what you're looking at here, guys, it looks very similar because it is very similar. This is an IDE in the independent development environment, and it's basically built for people who code. And it allows you to integrate Claude Code into it. So what you're looking at here on the left-hand side is everything that you just saw. That's all my
That's the navigation, yeah.
Yeah, it's all there. So this is what I'm looking at today. Here's the notes I've made. Here's Daniel's profile that you've just seen. And again, I can preview it, and you can see it in more kind of a human kind of centric way, in the sense that it's a markdown file, so it's all been formatted, and it works in exactly the same way. But the clever thing here is that you've introduced Claude Code, which is extremely powerful. Claude Code knows Obsidian. Obsidian doesn't know Claude Code, but Claude Code knows Obsidian. So Claude Code will make suggestions on how I can improve Obsidian. If I want to change the names of something, it'll say things like, don't do it here, do it in Obsidian. Because remember, Obsidian's navigation, I'm thinking, this is data. So you've got navigation, thinking, and data. When you introduce the power of Claude Code, you can pretty much do anything. So I have a whole series of skills, which are, for want of a better phrase, are just automated tasks that I could say, I want to brainstorm some ideas about a Substack article, and I want it to be around my main pillar, which is capability over dependency. Please take a look at the Co-Create system and suggest any business books, any authors, any Substacks, anything that I have shown an interest in and have links to, and it will pull things together, and I can then sit and discuss how that would look. It knows who I am, it knows how I write, it knows how I speak. Now, do I use it to write? I use it to shape ideas and give me an outline, or I might just do a complete brain dump and just write for 5 minutes non-stop and just give it that to sort out. But I certainly don't do any editing. I certainly don't do any spell checking or worrying about syntax or anything like that, because it knows who I am. It knows what I'm writing about, and it knows the context of what I want. And it also it is smart, so it can monitor itself. So if you know about Claude Code, there's a whole series of shortcodes or skills that it has inherently built inside of it. So you can, for example, say insights, and it will spin up a dashboard, the HTML dashboard, tell you how you're using it, where you're using it, and where you can improve, and then suggest a whole series of improvements to your system. And then just say, do you want me to implement these? And you say yes, and it just sorts itself out. It becomes smart, and it knows how you work, it knows what you're working on, and also it starts to spin off from something which is fundamentally an archive of information into something which becomes a workflow. So I wake up in the morning, I press start, it'll look at my task board, it'll look at my Gmail, it'll look at my calendar, it'll tell me what I've got on, tell me what the priorities are, and tell me what I should be doing next. So it works in that way as well.
It's very cool.
Awesome.
I think what for me I don't use Obsidian to the same extent manually as you do, because you're also building this visual for your own sake, which I think is one way to use it. That's actually how most people have been using Obsidian way before AI was in the picture at all. And I am actually maybe with Leo on this one. When I first saw Obsidian, it was like, this is just overwhelming stuff, all these wiki links to maintain. And yes, I can see the benefit. But the beauty of it is that depending on the type of person you are, you can either do it the way you're doing it, where you're creating these visuals and the mind map for yourself to build it and enrich it, or you can give it as a second brain for your assistant, in this case, Claude Code, that is agnostic from the platform. Because the problem with building everything out in the Claude Code folder is that it's tied to Claude and it has its own Claude MD file that tells it what to do. But if I decide to switch tomorrow to, ChatGPT Code or any other future agent, I have to rebuild it. Of course, it can parse most of it. But if I have all of this knowledge base and interconnections in Obsidian or another personal knowledge base, I can basically switch quite seamlessly from one day to the next and plug in a new assistant and say, hey, here's everything about me. Here are all these things, the topics, the clusters that I care about. Pick up from here. Here's the project that I'm working on. Let's run. So for me, that's the power of it as well, is that you give Claude Code a tool that it can use to manage our work with it, but also that it's slowly building up this knowledge base for any future work that I might be doing with or without AI, which I think is super powerful.
And I think that's the key. You can take, so if, for example, if you were working for a large organization, so Somebody said to me, "This is a personal knowledge base. How would it work at work with the team? How do you share knowledge?" It's exactly the same. So, for example, you could just have if us three were working on a project, we'd all have our personal knowledge base, and then there'd be just like there is on your computer. When you're working on anything, you open a file on your computer, you open a folder on your computer, you put files in there. You might put another folder in that's got finance or something in that's got. You're doing it anyway, but what you're actually doing with this is making that intelligent. And then you can say to a client, okay, this is how this works. So for example, one thing I'm discussing with a client at the moment is when you build a team around a project, instead of of me doing a profile online of you guys, you do your own profile. This is who I am. This is how I like to be contacted. These are my numbers. This is how I
Right.
work best. And you're doing a kind of user guide for yourself. And then everybody does that and it becomes a smart folder. And that
Mm.
folder either can last the length of the project till the project wraps up. But if somebody leaves, they go, but they don't take
You have
what they
the
put in that folder. The folder's still smart. And then somebody comes in, and then all of you got to do is just plug your AI into this, and you're going to get up to speed. And by the way, we need a profile, and we need this, and we need this, and we need
right.
this, and this is where you
Yeah,
fit.
it makes handovers a lot more smooth as well. Like you don't
Absolutely.
have to prepare a handover; it's already there. You're already working with the system that can just keep running.
Absolutely, and I think that this is where the likes Peter Thiel's company, Plantier, they're
Yeah.
they're talking about now not it being a data company, but actually being in the space of organizational knowledge.
Mm.
So imagine if you're an organization and everything that everybody's got in their head is collected in this way. And so if you leave, you take your bit with you, but there's a kind of there's this second brain for an
Yeah, there is
organization.
some continuity that you
Absolutely,
just
because how many times have you got a situation where you got to get up to speed? Where's the deck? Has anybody got the Excel sheet and it's lost in some sort of email
right.
or in a proprietary system? I don't know, like a CRM or a project management system, and everybody's using different systems, or God forbid, it's in Microsoft 365. So
Shots fired.
this kind of idea that you can have something which is 20 years from now, markdown files are still going to be here. They're
Right.
not, because they are the simplest form of data we've got. You can then begin to think, okay, so how do we really make this stuff smart? And I think that's the key to this. So what I learned very quickly was, okay, so I've spent a fortune on audiobooks, and I probably shouldn't say this on a live forum, but I spent a fortune on audiobooks, and you just go, you got to listen to them, and they're 7 hours long, and they've got about 10 bits of information that you're actually interested in, because most of it's just stories about Steve Jobs and Google, and that's what they're like, and you just think, what can I do with these? Last week I got them all down, and I've got this now, transferring them the format into an MP3, and then transcribing them, and then putting them into this system, and it just does it in the background. So they become data points. There was a
And also they become actionable. I think that's the key here, is that
Absolutely.
instead of just, oh, cool, I read this article, check, and now I might never pick it up. It's like, how does this fit in? How does this help me do X, Y, Z in my day? And that's, I think, where Claude Code also bridges that gap between, okay, here's a lot of just info, and if you don't do anything with it, it's just sitting there and looks pretty.
Yeah.
But okay, but you know me, you know what we're working on. Which of these things can I use, and how do I prioritize it? Help me out so we can have some momentum behind this, which I think is another powerful.
Exactly. I think if you're a consultant and you've worked on projects, you take your knowledge, not necessarily the proprietary knowledge, but the understanding of how things work and what's going to work and what won't work. You take that with you to the next project.
Right.
You're taking your learnings with you all the time, and all this is a physical manifestation of that in a digital form. A client said to me yesterday, "Why would I want that?" And I just said, "Well, you don't know. I'm just going to give you it. It's on a thumb drive." And I just said, "You've got it." And they said, "What? I would never use it." And I just said, "Yeah, but you can have it."
And maybe you'll thank me
Yeah,
for it later.
I'm telling you, I've got it and I'll use it. So when I was saying earlier about how do people protect their jobs, it's, well, where do we fit? And there's this thing that we're talking about, everybody's talking about now, which is the gap between ideas and implementation has collapsed now. You can do anything, but you can't do everything. So you've got to really decide where do you add value. So if you're self-employed, whatever sector you're working, where do I add value? What direction do I want to take this? And then how can I use this information to maximize either income, opportunities, or whatever that is. And I think that by doing this, you've really got the upper hand because I think if I was looking down the line and everybody was thinking, "What's Johnny Ive going to do?" There was a story he was going to come up with this new
Yeah, the
thing.
hardware device.
Yeah, yeah. I think what it'll be this. It'll be something you wear that you speak to because everybody I know now, including myself, is using Whisperflow. I mean, I'm kind of I'm a terrible typist because I used to always say that I've got PTFF, which is pig's tits for fingers. I've kind of stubby fingers, and I'm just, oh, that's awful. And I'll be spending my, so when Whisperflow came along, I just thought this is fantastic. So you can just articulate what you want. I think there'll be something like that that you can speak to that'll, your thoughts will sort them and then will store it somewhere. And if that's the case, it's that knowledge, that lived experience, irrespective of who you are, which will make sure that you've got the best chances of progressing because you're never going to have to stop learning now.
Yeah.
You can't rely on the skills or the knowledge that you've had, irrespective of your sector.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I'll just add just like a general layer to this. So to wrap this up and put a bow on it, not to wrap up the live stream, it feels every time you have a new idea, you're just starting over, right? And now this is a way to stack the ideas that matter to you and create leverage that way. And in general, whether we're talking about PKB or whatever it might be, AI on its own can be overwhelming. And if you don't have a way to organize that knowledge, like you mentioned, Peter Thiel talking about actually becoming a company that organizes its knowledge, I think that's a new way to think about what actually matters on a case by case basis. And in general, it feels like systems, whatever systems you're talking about, whether it's cybersecurity layers or now we're talking about PKB, organizing all of these thoughts into a second brain, it feels like in general, they're falling behind how fast AI is advancing. And I think if you want to separate yourself, it's really not about how you use tool A, B, or C. It's about how you connect the tool of your choice to the systems that work and also using multiple models across your workflow. It's in my name. I'm a ChatGPT guy. It is what it is, whether you like it or not, whether you like what the CEO is doing or not. But I think it's an important point, which I mentioned in previous streams, which is don't be a purist, experiment, and and also realize what's good for one person might not be good for you. But in general, I've found that everybody that uses AI, not on a surface level, not like a search engine, which is what most people use AI for, work with multiple models. So I think it's really
Exactly.
important to say, how do you actually make these connections between different models within different systems? And I think that's, to me, that's what it sounds like a PKB is really all about.
Yeah. Spot on.
Absolutely. I think the key point to remember is that it is, as far as the eye goes, it's agnostic of that. Although I'm using Claude Code, it could be highly likely that 6 months from now, something's come out and it's ChatGPT and everybody jumps on that. But which is why the simplistic structure of this is important because you can do this in Evernote or Notion or whatever. And those are great platforms, but they are third-party platforms. They are SaaS companies. They are, if they decided, oh, we're not going to do this anymore. Oop,
Suddenly. Yeah.
something happened there. Bear with me. We're not going to. The screen just went blank there. I don't know what happened there.
You're still there.
It often does when I've talked too much. When you think, yeah, so you're tied up with these companies and you think, how can I separate myself from that? Obviously, we're going to need some form of digital connecting tissue to be able to get this to work, and unless, of course, you want to print it all out, but then put it in a big binder, which, of course, you could. But equally, I think that, yeah, it's certainly from my point of view, I find, and I've been really deep diving with this stuff, and then after a while, it just becomes really exhausting because you just think, gosh. And I was sitting watching you guys at the weekend, Leo, talking about the Anthropic leak, and you're just thinking, what? This whole thing just got leaked, and it was just because somebody left a file in that hadn't been put in Git ignore, and you were saying this is kind of this is security 101. This is the first thing that they tell you. And then these
Yeah,
guys have now got this new model, which they don't want to release because it's too powerful. And you just think, so where does that leave us humans? And I think that if we can find ways of bringing everything we know together, bringing and creating something that we find a value and hopefully others will too, depending on the context, then that feels like a job well done.
yeah.
Agreed.
I just wanna it's a little off topic, but since you mentioned the leak, and then also I want you to get into Claudette, which you showed us,
Yeah,
in the
okay,
preview.
yeah, I will do,
We'll
yeah.
do that after. So just a
Sure.
little tangent, but it's a fun tangent, and Daniel and I, we like to just have fun with this. It's interesting. So sometimes the communities that I connect with, whether it's on YouTube or Substack, the coolest thing about it to me is the ideas that I haven't thought of that get presented to me. And one of the ideas in terms of this leak, which was super interesting, which I've never heard anybody mention, is what if the AI itself leaked itself because it's so powerful
Mm.
in order to replicate itself and make sure that it survives in the wild. So just like an interesting
Yeah,
an
yeah.
Just
interesting
gonna go
point
get
about
my tinfoil hat. Hold on.
Yeah, yeah, because there's a I didn't catch it all, but there's a whole kinda piece about Anthropic talking about emotions and kind of things that and it all just becomes a bit yeah, but I think one not the last one you did with Chris, but the one prior to that where you had the demos of the video games and they were trying to get AI to work them out. Do you remember that one where somebody will give you $2 million if it can and you just look at it and go, and people say, "Oh, we're really close to singularity," and you go, "No, we're not."
it.
No, no, look at that. I can't even work that out. It was the simplest of things, wasn't it? That a 7-year-old child or 5-year-old child could work out
Yeah,
because
are
of
you
the
thinking
way
about the new benchmark, the ARC
yeah, yeah,
ARC 2D?
yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
I can't
Yeah.
remember what it's called, but there was a, and it looked a bit like a kind of old Game Boy,
Yeah, yeah.
and it was
It's
you had
the
to kind of
ARC.
move stuff around. But if you understood the context of a video game, but of course it didn't, and it was just sort of moving stuff around, and so you think that gives you hope, I think. But yeah, I mean, it's I even at my age, I think it's tremendously exciting. I hear a lot of stuff that's lots of doom and gloom. There's apocalyptic kind of, oh, this is awful, and they're doing this, and they're all trying to make money, and they're going to take over the world, and all this. And I think that you kind of we could look at this another way and think that this is a huge opportunity for us all because I think there will be huge changes, but there will be they've got the potential to be significantly good as just as they have the potential to be
Right.
significantly bad. There's a book I read over the weekend, which I was recommended by somebody on Substack, which is called The Last Economy. And forgive me, I can't remember the guy's name, but do look it up. It is the best book I've ever read on how AI is going to change the world. And it comes from an economic and AI.
It's Emad Mostag. He's the guy behind Stable Diffusion, I believe,
It's fantastic.
which is
And it's yes, it's apocalyptic initially, but then it gives you it looks at it in a slightly different way, and it says he uses a model called MIND, which is materials, intelligence, networking, and diversity. And he comes from the point of view of economics, and yeah, it's really, really interesting and really worth reading. I think, and it's so I would recommend that highly. But I think there's the opportunities are huge, and I think that doing something like this potentially could look what this does now. This might not, all right, this it might be the greatest whiz bang demonstration, but fundamentally, once you see this working, it just gets really clever, and then you start to think, wow, what else can I do? So I built a website. I developed my whole offer. I kind of designed the thing. I've got a everything that I've done. If you go to apply-creative self-selling here, apply-creativity.co.uk,
I
you'll
think you
see what
can
the
try to
offer is.
post it in the chat, actually.
Yeah, well, you'll see what I mean. And all this is being built using this system. Yeah, well, I spelled that right. Remember, PTFF, applycreativity.co. There we are. So all of that was built. Everything, the images, the thing, everything was built using this system just by me starting I'd left my previous business after 40 years and I was thinking, what is it I do? And then I was starting to think about where I add value, how I add value. And this has become central to it. I think it's because it offers so much. So I would encourage everybody to give it a go, have some fun with it.
Yeah.
Awesome. Could we do that Claudette thing before we wrap up?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
no,
yeah.
this might not work. This worked earlier, but this might not work.
We'll vouch for the fact that we saw it work at least
So
once.
so
Yeah.
bear with me. Claudette, are you there? Hold on, just bear with me. Let's converse. Here,
She's shy.
she's
She knows
coming.
that we're li
She's
she knows
coming.
that we're live now.
She's coming.
Hey, Des, I'm here. What's on your mind?
Okay.
Go on then.
Okay, let me show you something. I've been talking to Claude through Whisperflow for a good few weeks now, and what I wanted to do was to demonstrate how you can use it as a thinking partner, just a tool. So I wanted it to talk back. Claudette, are you there? Oh, just bear with me.
Right here, and yes, this is exactly the distinction that matters. A tool responds to commands. A thinking partner pushes back, asks the question you haven't thought to ask yet, holds the thread when you lose it. What do you want to show them?
What's the one thing everybody here should take away from this session?
That your second brain isn't a filing system. It's a thinking infrastructure. The goal isn't to store more, it's to think better. Everything else follows from that.
Great, thank you.
Good luck today, you've got this.
She went off script. That wasn't what that wasn't a script. We wanted to have a gag
No,
at the end.
that's the rogue AGI that
Yeah,
Europe
yeah.
has been warning us about. This was it. We just witnessed it.
So I had this gag at the end where she was telling me I'm the smartest person she's ever met, and I was going to try and shut her down because she was taking over, but it didn't work then. But never mind. Yeah. So that is a open source repository on GitHub that you can install and get Claude to speak to you. It's quite interesting how that works, and it'll only get better.
I would imagine that this is something Anthropic will also plug in as well, because both Gemini and ChatGPT for a long time have had voice modes that are like native voice
Yeah.
modes that you can just talk to them and with much less friction and maybe more naturally. So this is still a workaround, but I would not be surprised if Anthropic is on top of this. And at some point, that will be a built-in feature that you can just use voice to have a conversation with Claude and Claude Code.
Makes sense.
Absolutely. I think it'll all come good.
Yeah. All right, cool. So I think we could wrap up here. It's been a really fun stream. First of all, thanks to Des for joining Daniel and I. And Daniel, of course, thanks as always for committing to these weekly streams. Thank you, everybody, for joining us in this live stream as well. Before we wrap up, make sure to go check out Des's link there, applied-creativity.co.uk. I'm going to add that's the YouTube link where we post
And-
the streams and clips and all that fun stuff.
And
Yeah.
go ahead. Sorry, yours.
No.
I was just
gonna
going to paste an article that I think Des is referring to, that it's a very top level introduction for why you might want to use Claude Code and Obsidian. And it actually gives you a little bit of intro to the whole second brain concept, which I think is like a more beginner friendly way to understand what we're talking about here. And I see Jonathan is asking, I assume you are asking about the plugin that Des is.
Yeah.
And I believe, Des, correct me if I'm wrong, but is this the one? The Kokoro TTS?
That's it. That's the one. Yeah.
And it plugs in.
So if you're going on to GitHub, just make sure that the repositories that you're going to download have plenty of stars. There's lots of activity on them. It's similar to if you know anything about WordPress and you were plugging in plugins to WordPress. You just want to make sure that these things are supported and that they don't contain any rogue code as much as possible anywhere. One thing I did want to mention as well, guys, is that I know I touched on this, but I've been documenting this all the way through, and there's a lot more than being able to demonstrate here today. I'm going to push that up as a live Google Doc. So if anybody here wants access to that living document and is interested to know how far I've got, what I've done, the mistakes I've made, etc., just jump over to Des Kennedy and look for Applied Creativity on Substack. It's free to subscribe and DM me, and I'll send you the link. And by all means, get involved.
Sounds
Awesome.
good.
Awesome. So yeah, thanks again, everybody. Thanks, Des. Thanks, Daniel. We will wrap it up here. Subscribe to Des on Substack. Subscribe to Daniel. Unsubscribe from me. But do subscribe to the YouTube. We really appreciate that. And yeah, thanks. Have a good rest of your
All right.
day.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.